Coming up next in This Week in Computer Hardware, behind Project Shield, Intel's awesome new mSATA drives, Crysis 3, download Catalyst 13.2, inside Corsair's Hydro H80i, emergency dentistry, and more. It's all coming up next on Twitch.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust. This is Twitch.
Bandwidth for Twitch is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, episode 203, recorded on January 31st, 2013. Retr0bright, that old PC.
This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by Lantronix, maker of the Xprint server. Print from your iPad, iPhone, or any iOS device to virtually any printer. For more information, visit xprintserver.com/twit and enter coupon code TWIT to receive free shipping on your order.
Welcome to This Week in Computer Hardware. I'm your host, Patrick Norton, and if I sound funny today, it's because I've got a whole lot of Novocaine in this side of my face after an emergency trip to the dentist. On a somewhat more technical note, or at least hardware-friendly note, Mr. Ryan Shrout may or may not be joining us from Kentucky.
Well, I will be joining at least in audio form and hit or miss video form, hopefully to have this worked out. So you might have an issue with your audio. I will likely have an issue with my video. Combined, we will be one podcaster, and we can get through this episode of Twitch.
I don't have an issue with my audio. I have an issue with my face right now, not responding when I do things like talk, and that's after most of the Novocaine wore off. It's an exciting actual week in hardware, so we're gonna skip right into it. Should we start with the posting on NVIDIA about Shield? Or basically the Project Shield details, the fact that it may be as much as a year out, some information from, well, the blog entry from NVIDIA is how Shield got built. And the other big news from NVIDIA this week is that NVIDIA is going to go to kind of take a page out of Intel's playbook and start producing smartphones and tablets white box style, which is the idea that they're going to make tablets that you can put your name on, your particular load of software, your branding for third parties. Are you excited about the idea of NVIDIA producing their own smartphones and tablets, or does that sound like one tablet manufacturer too many at this point, Ryan?
No, let's talk about that, and then we'll go back and talk about the Shield stuff too. I think the idea of white labeling tablets and cell phones is a good idea for the consumer, right? Because it does two things. It brings more options out, and it will thus potentially lower prices, which I think all consumers really want.
Right.
I think what you'll see now are maybe things like an EVGA tablet. Actually, we're on the next story here, Burke. We'll come back to that one in a second. An EVGA branded tablet, right? We talked about when the Shield came out that we weren't going to have EVGA branded NVIDIA Shields, but having, if this happens where they actually do white label tablets and smartphones, you could have an EVGA tablet, you could have a Main Gear tablet, you could have, iBuyPower, CyberPower, all these different companies that usually just build PCs and aren't big enough to order, 100,000, 250,000 tablets that would require to get, a full run through that way.
Well, to a certain degree, that market or that market already exists in China. You can go. I want to say the Zhejiang province, which I've A, said wrong, and B, said the wrong province. My apologies to anyone listening in China right now. But you can actually do that, where you can go in, walk into a storefront, spec a model, and they will build it for you and ship you, and if you cut them a check or wire them the money, they'll ship you, 6 weeks or 90 days later, you'll get a container full of tablets. You could have the PC per tablet for that matter. But
now we're talking.
Do you think NVIDIA is going to bring this to the next level, make it more legitimate?
I mean, they would only do it if they were going to do it that way, right? And NVIDIA has a good design team. The Shield is a pretty good-looking product. They have made good-looking graphics cards before, and really they would want to do this because they're having issues getting into the mobile market, right? They want Tegra to be a big-time player, and they haven't been able to get the design wins that they need. They haven't been able to get the like enough people to adopt their products early enough to start being a major player in the field. And one of the things that they could get away with here is quicker time to market. The design cycles in cell phones and tablets take a while, and they would be able to possibly get around it this way.
It's funny you should say that, but isn't a lot of their problem getting design wins is their early issue with shipping Tegra 2 on time, which created so many issues for Boxy by shipping late. Some of the other issues they've had with shipping some of their mobile APUs.
But if this happens, they have nobody else to blame but themselves, right? And that's good for consumers, right? You want to hold they want to break into Qualcomm's business. They want to break into Samsung's business, and they're not able to do that very reliably while depending on their partners. They're having a tough time kind of breaking into it as much as they feel like their product is valued at. I think this is more interesting maybe on the cell phone market because we don't have white label cell phones in this country.
Well, that's because of the whole contract subsidization. Carriers want to lock you into a multi-year contract to maximize the revenue from you. And if you bring your own phone, a la Ting, right? I'm actually become a huge fan of Ting. I've owned a modem that's on Ting. I bought one with my own money with the fabulous Twitch discount, which I highly recommend you try. But and anyone, by the way, can try that discount. But it was amazing for me to realize that instead of paying $60 or $100 a month for my wireless modem, in months where I barely used it, I paid $6. And carriers like AT&T and Verizon, they want to make all of the money, and they want to make it month after month. That's part of the reason why they desperately want everybody on smartphones, because they make a huge amount of money off of smartphones.
Right.
So we could also talk about whether or not this is going to spur Intel into, because Intel is the other company who desperately wants to be in cell phones and tablets in a big way. Let's talk about Project Shield. Do we have a ship date? And what's the biggest thing that came out of the blog post on how Project Shield got built?
So we don't really have a ship date different than what we got at CES, which was Q2 2013,
right?
Which was a little bit more specific than I thought. What kind of brought that up in my mind while reading this blog post that they posted on NVIDIA.com? It's actually a really interesting story.
Yeah,
they talk about the development of Shield and how they went from an idea at a table to the CES announcement in less than a year.
That's pretty amazing when you think about hardware development cycles.
It is. It's impressive. It's impressive. But one of the things that I also kind of took away from it was now I question if they'll actually be able to get a mass-produced product available by Q2 2013. Right?
Is that because all of the hacks they did to produce the prototypes may not scale well when they try to produce 1 million of them?
Possibly, right? And the blog post kind of talks about, hey, we have the best people at developing these practices for mass production on assembly lines, and we did all this stuff on purpose to do this type of thing. And it's a really interesting take. They talk about why did they decide to build it, and Tony Tomasi says, what was his line? That they had built the hardware with Tegra 4, they had built the software both with the GeForce Experience, your driver on your PC, and they were in the middle of writing controller software, like gaming controller software for Android devices, because they wanted Android to really take off as a gaming platform. They said, why don't we just make a device with all this that kind of combines it?
Right.
They basically have a very vertical integration at this point. They make the chip, they produce the part, they produce the software, they have the GeForce GTX in your system that will power the streaming games in your house and that kind of stuff.
I mean,
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's interesting because it's like Project Shield began with an effort to strip gaming down to its most essential component, a great controller. Quote, we wrote all the core software to hook Android games to controllers, Tony says. Then we thought, why don't we just build a device with a great controller built in? And the interesting was the design philosophy in here. Tony Tomasi basically said, we couldn't prove it couldn't be done, so we decided it could be. So the idea is that they basically couldn't prove they couldn't build one, so they ended up, sucking down fried chicken and soldering until late into the night after night.
Isn't that a great line?
It is an absolute.
We decided that what did he say? We
couldn't prove that it couldn't be done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they decided to give it a shot. And it's like I was trying to wrap my mind around that circular logic
Well,
right? I guess it's decent.
The paragraph before that is the notion isn't to hit impossible deadlines fueled by adrenaline and fried chicken grease. It's to understand the limits of what can be done and work within only those basic constraints. So that's an interesting idea. It's like, how fast can we jam this thing out? What can we? What are our absolute physical constraints, and let's build within those.
The other thing that I kind of got from it, it's a good story. I encourage everybody to go to you can go to pcper.com and get the link to it. I think it's blogs.nvidia.com if you want to just go look it up. But they have several lines in there that made me, they're obviously meant to temper the fact that NVIDIA is not going to be in any of the next generation of consoles.
Right.
And that they say that this is their kind of answer to it. They think that they're going to try to produce a product and Project Shield that is better than what you would get out of a console. And they seem to believe that the development for Android gaming will be better.
Right.
The ability to stream games from your gaming PC to a TV into your wireless Project Shield device will be better than what you get on a console. And obviously they wouldn't be saying these things if they were going into PlayStation or an Xbox.
Right.
Right. So I'm a little bit, part of me kind of looks at part of me kind of thinks, okay, this only happened in the last year. Almost like a year ago, less than a year ago, they realized we're not going to be in these consoles. What are we going to do about it? Like, what can we do to prove that we are still dominant in the gaming fields? And they came up with this idea. And I wonder if this would even have existed had they been in Sony or Microsoft's next device.
It probably wouldn't. On one hand, I don't think it would have been so. I don't think they would have put so much energy behind it. On the other hand, it's still compelling for them because they are doing these mobile processors and they do want a huge market for them. So this could also be the gateway to the console manufacturers saying, "Gee, we want to be able to stream our gear to this device. Maybe we should reconsider our designs, or is there something we can do to make that happen?" Not holding my breath on that one. But it's funny that they're making the effort to sort of make that marketing insinuation that, we don't need consoles. We've got, Shield. We've got the mobile market. When I was just reading an article, a friend of mine posted around that was talking about how AMD has all the console wins, but is still being beaten up by Wall Street and other places. So go figure.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great little post, cool little story.
Yeah.
Check it out.
Cool pictures, actually. And it gives you a really interesting kind of behind-the-scenes look at how things can get done in Silicon Valley and the idea that they've, all these just sort of facilities that they took advantage of to build this. Something else to take advantage of, Intel SSD 525 series full capacity roundup. Intel sweeps mSATA. Alan Malventano writing up on PCPer.com. Yeah, this is what's the easiest way to explain, for those of you who are not familiar with mSATA, what is the easiest way to describe that? The mobile version of SATA drives, the notebook, the Ultrabook friendly SATA drive. I mean, it's a very small form factor.
it is electrically equivalent to SATA, right? But it combines data and power into a small chip. It's about 1/8 of the physical size of a 2.5-inch SSD.
Yeah.
And it was built obviously for Ultrabooks, for laptops, that kind of stuff.
So that's a 520 you're looking at right now. That's the full size.
That's a regular SSD. And if you scroll down the next picture, you'll see an mSATA SSD, which is very small, and you got a couple of chips on this side. You got the controller on the right, and you've got 2 NAND flash chips on the left. On the other side, you would see some more. But what's interesting is not only are these being used in laptops, but we saw several motherboards last year come out with mSATA ports on them, right? And the idea being, here's a port you can just use for caching, right? You can use it, put a 60 gig SSD in there, and now you don't have to worry about using up an extra SSD slot or an extra SATA cable or something like that with for SSD caching.
Right.
But as these become more popular, we were talking about it last night, the idea of having a motherboard with an mSATA port that we then put a 180 gig or 240 gig mSATA drive in,
right?
And that's your OS drive. Boom, you're done, right? You don't have to have any more SSD. You can just use standard spindle drives for extended storage and stuff.
Which
is pretty cool.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Alan points out that they're not at sub 1 gigabyte, sub $1 per gigabyte cost like the 2.5-inch drives are, but these are a quarter the size, roughly 1/8 the physical volume of a 2.5-inch SSD.
Yep.
So basically, the 525. 6 gigabit per second performance in the smaller form factor, wide introductory capacity options. Basically starts at $30, 30 gigabytes for $54, topping out at 240 gigabytes for $279. It's going to be a good year to buy SSDs if you haven't done one, haven't bought one yet, and a 5-year warranty from Intel. So that's pretty awesome to see Intel pushing the mSATA, form factor.
They have released mSATAs before. The 310 series was set a 3.0 gigabit per second part. There have been a couple of others, but there haven't been a whole lot of options. Like when I built the Intel NUC, you know, it uses an mSATA SSD, and there were very few options, and they were fairly expensive. And so I think as more platforms try to take advantage of it, we'll see more of these vendors in there. And pricing will come down, but you got to think they're using the most dense NAND flash possible to get those capacities on such a small size, right?
Right.
So it makes sense if they're a little bit more expensive. And these are by far the best performing mSATA drives that Alan has seen as well, which, you know, helps a lot. They're powered by SandForce controller. I want to make sure I point that out too. They're not a new Intel controller or anything like that.
I promised various people in the universe that I would mention the alternative to Android, the alternative to iOS, BlackBerry when the announcement went through. RIM is now BlackBerry, us.blackberry.com. The Z10 is going to be the first phone. It's a BlackBerry device with a full touchscreen. Major updates to the operating system. 70,000 applications at launch. A lot of people are saying the Android emulator is a hot mess. The low-light performance of the camera isn't so good. But if you are a BlackBerry fan, BlackBerry is going to try very hard to give you a reason to buy another BlackBerry device before you move over.
I wondered how many people thought that was the name of the company anyway.
Quite a few.
I bet if you'd like take away the tech sector,
right?
That it was like, yeah, of course it's BlackBerry.
I have a BlackBerry produced by Research in Motion, advanced. Yeah, it's you know what, BlackBerry. March. If you're excited, tell us why. Email us. Twitch, TWICH at twit.tv is the email address. It's a good-looking piece of hardware. The Verge has one of the best write-ups on it I've seen. They got in-depth with it as much as they could. Q10, which is going to be a keyboard-enabled version coming later. AMD's got a new GPU driver optimized. Is the Catalyst 132 beta, is it only optimized for Crysis 3, or are they doing some other things while they're releasing this update? So
13.2, not 132, I hope.
My apologies.
Yeah. The URLs take the decimal place out of it. So 13.2, they've released in the past week, I think, 4 different betas. They sent me another one this afternoon, so they're up to beta 4 of 13.2, and it's specifically targeting Crysis. There's other stuff in there, but the main focus and why they're releasing them on these quick cadences is for Crysis 3 multiplayer beta that's ongoing right now, and it's Crysis is going to be an AMD sponsored title, so they're eager to make sure that their products are optimized for it. The Crysis just because I don't know if we mentioned it before. I don't think we did, but the Crysis 3 multiplayer beta is going on right now, and it's free. All you have to do is have an Origin on your system, and then go into the store to the demos, and you can download the Crysis 3 multiplayer beta. We did a stream on it on Tuesday night.
Nice.
And if you want to watch that, you can see me totally get destroyed for like an hour in the multiplayer with it. It looks good, as you would expect. Both NVIDIA and AMD are saying very frequently that the performance that you're seeing today is not the final performance of the game, because they still have, a couple of weeks worth of optimizations they can do in their drivers and stuff. But it looks good.
It always amazes me when they tweak a driver and 15% on Crysis 3, 10% improvement in crossfire performance in Crysis 2, 50% performance boost in Devil May Cry when you're running a single AMD GPU. I mean, it always kind of blows my mind how much performance they can get out of a driver tweak is probably not the right word because the engineers probably worked really hard on this, and I don't want to belittle their work, but like driver tweaks making radical improvements in performance. I just always think that's amazing to see.
And I think what you'll see, we've talked a lot about stutter testing on graphics cards and the frame rating stuff that I'm doing, and that some of the other people are doing as well. There will be significant driver changes coming up that will drastically change the way data is handled on the GPU, right? And that's one of the things with fully programmable shaders and fully programmable driver models. They can basically change a ton of stuff, right? And I think we'll see some pretty interesting driver changes as we go over the next couple of months.
Creative, still making sound cards. I don't mean to sound obnoxious when I say that, although I probably just did. Asus with the Zonar did something really interesting where they started really getting serious about audiophile grade cards. Creative's kind of followed them down that path. The Creative Blaster Z is the latest update in that lineup. Tech Power Up is a great write-up on it. I got to say, it is a beautiful piece of hardware. You know, to me, you may not enjoy it as much as I do, but I thought it was kind of a cool design because I remember, lots and lots of green Creative boards back in the day. But the Sound Blaster Z, PCI Express X1 form factor, 5.1 capable, so basically it'll fit into a small form factor PC. Quote, coming in at just under $100, the Sound Blaster Z is the smallest and cheapest of the new generation of sound cards from Creative. No audiophile features like the ability to swap op amps, which is really cool if you're an audio nerd. Instead, you get a smart sound card that looks flashy, comes in a convenient form factor, and includes a microphone of good quality. Soundcore 3D processor from Creative, which is a quad-core processor, basically takes some of the sound rendering off the CPU. 24-bit 192 out. Basically kind of optimized for headphones in a lot of ways. Quote, great in-game performance, usable 11-band equalizer, headphone amplification stage, can drive fairly demanding headphones well, so if you have a serious pair of headphones, you might be able to drive them directly off of this. And I'm going to tell you for the cons and the rest of the pros, you should go to techpowerup.com and read their review of the Sound Blaster Z. And $100, so it's affordable compared to some of the more high-end cards we've seen.
Yeah.
Are you currently running a dedicated audio rendering device, Mr. Shrout?
No, I don't think I am on any of my systems. The streaming system does, but not really. Is that bad? Does that make me a bad person?
No, it does not make you a bad person. The Asus, I got to say, the Asus Zonar is a fantastic audiophile source. I'm actually really curious about the ZXR, which is a little pricey at $250. That's Creative ZXR, but I like the idea of being able to do things like swap op amps because I am an audio nerd. Yes, I am.
You are.
One last thing before we take a moment to thank our sponsor, Lantronix, and their fantastic little white box that we'll explain in a second. Gigabyte Z77X-UP7. Screw bargain boards, Gigabyte's going all out. I mean,
this is far from a bargain board. But it has some unique qualities and features to it. This is kind of Gigabyte's response to some of the Asus ROG stuff.
Right.
It's supposed to be a high-end, super high-end overclocking, lots of features. The only thing that it's missing that I think I would have maybe liked to see on it was Thunderbolt or something like that. Not a lot of people are really itching for Thunderbolt, as it turns out. I
think you and I are more excited about Thunderbolt than anybody else in North America right now, because all I want to do is figure out a way to do Thunderbolt enclosures to a low-power device, which essentially means, somebody else's MacBook that they left around the office. But that's why we're building this as a network-attached storage box because it has a Thunderbolt port on the back. Is that an Intel NUC?
It is. It is. So that's what we're using for that. This board, back to this board, what it does have is a really cool orange and black color scheme, which I like.
Yes.
I think it looks nice.
It's
but
stylish.
Notice on there that there are 5 by 16 PCI Express slots. 4 of them are orange and 1 of them is black. And you've got a couple of by 1s that are black as well. And this board has a PCI Express 3.0 splitter switch essentially on the board that will take the 16 lanes off the processor, split it into 4 by 8s, right? So it takes the 16, splits it into 32, and then breaks it up to all 4 of the orange slots there. So you can run quad SLI, quad Crossfire on it at that you can't run on an Ivy Bridge platform without that kind of bridge chip.
And finally, you'll have a reason for that 15 or 1600 watt power supply you've been itching to buy.
Exactly. What's maybe more interesting that they've done is that black PCI Express slot that's between the first 2 orange there actually is, what do they call it? They call it Direct Connect. And what that does is they have logic on the board so that if there's something plugged into the black PCI Express slot, it actually bypasses the PCI Express, the PLX bridge chip, and goes straight to the CPU. So if you're one of those people that's kind of worried about the latency of maybe going through an extra chip on the board, you have the option with this board to go with direct connection full by 16 to the CPU, or break it up for multi-GPU configurations that way, which is actually a really cool way of doing it. So you kind of get both options. You don't have to worry about selling 2 different motherboard SKUs for those 2 different types of audiences and stuff.
Interesting.
They also, the other big feature of this is the power. It's spelled POWIR, power stage chips. These are like really, really high-end MOSFETs, power management devices, 32 phases of them on the motherboard. I think I heard a statistic somewhere that the monetary value of these 32 phase power stage chips is worth as much as the rest of the motherboard.
Whoa.
Which means a lot to somebody. I mean, for huge overclocking potential, that's the kind of stuff that you need. I don't personally need that. I don't do that kind of overclocking, but there are a lot of people out there that do. If you go to, the only other thing I want to point out about this board before we move on is if you go to the overclocking page, this is the first motherboard that I've ever seen. Maury did the review for us, but the first motherboard I've ever seen where the automatic overclocking software that they have did better than we were able to do with manual overclocking.
Whoa, that's actually a big deal.
Yeah, it got 4.58 gigahertz, and we were only able to get 4.4. And Maury works on a lot of motherboards. He knows what he's doing, so I don't think that this was some fluke.
Was he upset? Was Maury upset that he was not able to beat the machine? No, Skynet will not win.
He did try longer than normal on that type of stuff because he wanted to make sure that he wasn't missing something. And I think what it comes down to basically is that the BIOS engineers at Gigabyte, you know, they know more about all the tweaks and settings that they have on their board than Maury does, or that most users will. And you know, there's the kind of secret is there's not a lot of different processor SKUs out there, and it's not very difficult for each motherboard vendor to specifically tune for the 3570K or the 3770K or the 3570 base, you know, and those types of things, and create very specific profiles for those individual processors, which is what I think probably happened here. So either way, that turns out pretty good for the consumer if you can auto overclock your way out of it. Pricing, $399.
Wow.
Yeah, so $400 motherboard.
That's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. You better know that you want a super high-end motherboard. They're not going to get a casual builder and go, you know what, I think I'll get that motherboard instead, right? That's, I mean, you're talking about a $200 price premium over even most high-end options.
I can see a lot of San Francisco Giants fans buying this motherboard.
See, I'm a Bengals fan, and they're black and orange as well.
See?
If Gigabyte had like a black and orange graphics card or something to go along with it, you know, maybe we'd start talking. I like the black orange on there. Maury listed as something as a negative because he didn't like it, but I was a fan.
Maybe he's a Browns fan. We all have our crosses to bear.
Yeah, we've all got our issues in life.
Ouch. I should take a moment to point out that the sound card, the Creative Sound Blaster with these swappable op amps are actually, I believe, the Creative Sound Blaster X-Fi Titanium HD PCI Express sound card. It's $180. Actually, it's a very pretty card. But yeah, basically, they have swappable op amp sockets on there. Keep going down. Keep going down, Burke. Keep going down. Keep going down. Should be way. There it is. Apparently the link I put in the show notes didn't work. There it is. That's the one. Burke never goes back, people. Do not die on Burke's watch. He will leave you like a Lannister lackey in Westeros. Guess what I've been trying to finish this week?
I was gonna say, man.
Oh my goodness, that I'm in the one where everybody dies, which is pretty much every one of them. So
yeah, they all die all the time.
They all die all the time. Let's take a moment to thank our lovely sponsor, Lantronix. This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by Lantronix, maker of the Xprint server. This is actually really cool. If you have never heard of this, which means you've probably never listened to our show before, I want you to pay attention. If you got an iPad, an iPhone, any iOS device, if you want to print from it, and you don't want to buy a specific printer that maybe makes awful prints just because it will actually print directly from iOS, it's pretty cool. The Xprint server will actually, in your home, in your office, you attach it to your network. It's funny, right? You got an iPhone, you got an iPad, you want to print from it, and Apple tells you got to buy this printer or this series of printers from this company. You know, if you're not AirPrint compatible, you're out of luck. So, and here is the actual device itself. You plug this critter, and you actually have one of these running in your office right now, don't you, Ryan?
I do. It's attached to our network. We were sent one when they started doing sponsors, and we wanted to just kind of see exactly how it worked. And the best part was how super easy it was to set up by far.
Ethernet plugged directly into your router, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And did it take you like 3 minutes to set it up?
If that, like you literally plug in the Ethernet cord, plug in the power cord, wait like 30 seconds for the light on the top there where the X is to stop blinking. And it has detected your printers, and you can use the AirPrint app options or the AirPrint options in any applications on your iPhone and iPad and iPods and that kind of stuff. The USB port there is for, it also can act as a, if you have a USB printer, not a network printer, you plug it in there and it you know, will make it available to not only the iOS devices, but all the other devices on your network as well. So it kind of acts like a print server.
A traditional print server.
Too. And you can use a hub there, and I think you can attach 5 or 8 on the base model.
So the Home Edition.
The Home Edition.
Home Edition is $99, supports up to 8 USB and 2 network printers. The Network Edition is $149 and supports unlimited network printers. Something like over 4,000 printers are actually supported. You plug it in, it automatically finds your printers, and you are good to go. I think it's actually pretty slick, and I like the idea that you can basically make any USB printer or that they support a network shared printer. Go to xprintserver.com/twit for more information, and if you want to buy one of these magical devices from Lantronix, that's the Xprint server. And seriously, if you use the coupon code TWIT, you'll get free shipping on your order. And let me remind you one more time, xprintserver.com/twit. And at checkout, enter the coupon code TWIT, and you will score free shipping on your order. If you want to make it easy to print from your iOS devices, you should definitely be checking out Lantronix, xprintserver.com/twit. And use TWIT when you check out to get free shipping. We've got a couple more news stories before we go in our special network hell and dentistry disabled. I'm like, wow, my face is still swollen because I can see it in the monitor. Isn't that just lovely?
Yeah.
I just love emergency dentistry, people. It makes me so happy. Almost as happy as gaming notebooks. I gotta say, I am a gaming desktop kind of guy. Mostly because every time I look at a gaming laptop, I think it's big, it's heavy, and I'm going to want to replace it in 18 months. Do you feel that way, Mr. Shrout?
Yes.
So MSI's GX60 gaming notebook review is up on TechSpot. Sean Knight wrote that up for him. If you are curious how much gaming notebook you can get for $1,200, you might want to take a look at the MSI GX60. 15.6 1920 by 1080 matte display. I love matte displays. AMD A10 processor, Radeon HD 7970M with 2 gigabytes of discrete memory for the graphics, 8 gigabytes DDR3 RAM, 128 gigabyte SSD, and a 750 gigabyte HDD spinning at 7200 RPM. Do you hear that sound? That is the sound of battery life dropping precipitously. A Blu-ray drive, 4 audio jacks, 3 USB 3.0, 1 USB 2.0, which I'm all at this point. I'm like, okay. you do not want to be carrying this onto the plane. Well, you probably do want to be carrying it onto the plane if you're a gamer, but this is a big honking desktop replacement with actually better specs than a lot of motherboards I've seen lately. The Killer Intelligent Networking, aka Killer NIC, the first time this has been integrated into a notebook. According to Killer, quote, the solution is able to automatically detect and accelerate game traffic ahead of other network traffic for smoother, stutter-free in-game performance, which could lead to a competitive edge. 15 by 6 by 10.5 by 2.2 inches, weighs in at a healthy 7.7 pounds. This is a big honking notebook, and I am going to make you head over to techspot.com to find out how the benchmarks were. But I will say this. Technically, this is for $1,200 gaming on a budget if you are a laptop gamer.
I just want to say that this MSI's gaming laptops have been gaining some traction recently.
Yeah. They're doing a good job. I don't want to...
They're nice machines.
Yes.
They're not, they're not going to have the build quality of a MacBook Air or something like that. But in terms of high performance, low cost gaming machines, they're probably the best out there. And they're one of the only companies still like, I don't know what to say, marketing or pushing those particular products. Asus has ROG gaming notebooks, but they don't really talk about them that much.
Right.
Lenovo has one. Alienware's out there, and they don't do any marketing and that kind of stuff or push for it because people just assume they're going to use that. MSI's done a really, really good job, and they're just kind of now starting to get a solid foothold in the U.S. market.
Yeah, it's I'm kind of curious why they chose the AMD A10 over an Intel part, but I got to say, a well-spec'd out machine, and apparently the monitor is quite gorgeous. So
I can tell you why they chose the A10. You want to know why?
Absolutely.
Because AMD asked really, really nicely.
Aww.
I'm sure they wanted an all AMD laptop that was for gaming, right? AMD CPU, AMD discrete GPU. See, look, we can still do this, that kind of thing. That would be my guess.
So tell me, were you angry when you decided to deconstruct the Corsair Hydro Series or I should say, was Maury angry when he decided to deconstruct the Corsair Hydro Series H80i high-performance liquid CPU cooler? If you've never built your own water cooling system, it's kind of interesting to see what they're doing now, and maybe even more so if you have built your own water cooling system. But Maury over at PCPro.com tore open. Tear down. We actually, it's funny on Tekzilla this week.
It is not functioning anymore.
No,
that's how tore down it is.
It was funny. We had Kyle Weens from iFixit on Tekzilla this week with a tore apart. Basically, they tore open a GoPro Hero 3, and it's amazing. Nice. Pardon me while I scratch my nose. It's amazing to see the inside of those and how densely packaged they are. But if you scroll down the Corsair, it's basically a plastic top cap assembly, and then there's an electronic control mechanism, PCB with the LED for the top cap logo, the Corsair Link BIOS and ports, fan controller ports in there, and then, of course, the big old, what they call the cold plate or heat sink, a big old block of copper that the water distributes around. And you can see there's there's the fan. When we scroll up a little bit, you'll see a big block of copper with a white piece of plastic in the middle of it. And this is kind of like the heart and core of any water cooling system, because essentially that controls how well the water, basically that's the interface between the coolant, the water or whatever coolant you're using inside of that, and the processor, and that controls how effectively you remove heat or move heat off of the processor. I thought that was pretty interesting. The white thing on top is a rubber impingement plate, says Maury, and this was pretty funny, and some really nice high quality tubing on that actually. Which is a really nice thing to have, something where you're not going to have to deal with water evaporation or water leaks. I wouldn't play around with it too much, but I'm also paranoid.
we just got our H80, H90, and H110s in, and really? Maury's going to do tests on those. So those are the 140 millimeter versions, 140 and 280 respectively.
Oh my goodness! I just found the H1110. That's 280 millimeter high performance liquid cooling.
Yeah.
That thing is huge.
Yeah. I got one in here. It is in a big box. I haven't used it for anything yet, but I got a couple of use cases coming up, so we will see.
Case in point, the Gigabyte motherboard that self-overclocks to like 4.58 gigahertz.
Right.
One last thing before we go. If you have older plastic devices, plastic PCs, perhaps your aging point of purchase display is looking a little awkward. I thought this was great. Jeremy wrote this up for PC but the actual article is was originally on Hardware Secrets. It's the Hardware Secrets Guide to Restoring Old Computers to Their Original Color. And that's your basic approximation of a before and after. Hardware Secrets gives full credit to the group that actually invented it with their original recipe. Retr0bright is what they're calling the process. You have to disassemble the device. Do not attempt to Retr0bright a device with the expensive or not so expensive vintage electronic components inside. Because basically, you clean the plastic parts, you apply a solution, and then you put it under ultraviolet light, and it basically blows out the yellow and brings back the awesome, white or gray color, or at least somewhat less yellow. The thing I keep thinking about this the most is how much I absolutely love modern PC cases, because they aren't putty institutional gray. But Retr0bright.wikispaces.com for the people who originated what they call the Retr0bright project. It's actually really fascinating, because if you have a keyboard you particularly love it's gray and yellow, or a piece of hardware that you want to look pretty again.
Yep.
This is the way to do it, people. And props to Hardware Secrets for
peroxide
putting that
mix.
And Jeremy for finding that one and promoting it. We're going to cut this episode a little short. Normally at this point in the podcast, we would be answering viewer questions. Twitch, TWICH at twit.tv is the email address. And we're going to make up for it with more questions next week.
Yep.
Because I'm actually starting to feel the terrible, terrible things the nice dentist did to me. And you can notice my eyes starting to turn red. So I'm going to beg out before I start weeping or Ryan's network connection drops out. Ryan, what's coming up on PC Per this week, man?
So this week we have, this is interesting. We have this Zotac AD13, Nano AD13. So this is kind of a competitor to the NUC right here. Oh, see, good freeze. Good time for that freeze to happen. And the only problem is this is based off of a dual-core AMD Brazos-based APU, so performance is not nearly as high, but the cost is significantly lower. So we'll have a review of that going up, and then finally a review of the Sony Tap 20 that we've had here for a little while as well.
Nice.
A little bit quiet still as we await the onslaught of high-end product releases coming later in the quarter.
The post-CES frenzy.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. It's going to be an interesting week on Tekzilla. We've got Tara Long from the game shows at Revision 3. She's going to be talking about the new release of SimCity, which I understand she is actually obsessed with. We're going to show off the Android and Raspberry Pi versions of XBMC, the Xbox Media Center, which just released version 12 Frodo this week. And, well, we have other exciting things, but I'm going to keep those a secret, because apparently that's the way I roll this evening, because the Novocaine is wearing off fast and the pain, it is coming.
Yes.
That's it for this edition of Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Patrick Norton.
I'm Ryan Shrout.
We'll see you next week on Twitch.